Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers while they're here to be celebrated. With me, I have a man who's a renowned speaker, author, and DJ specializing in unlocking creativity within the hospitality and music industries. His works have been featured in print and electronic media. He's the author of the books DJs Mean Business, and the book that we're going to talk about today, The Quiet Storm, which is available wherever books are sold. He got a master's degree from the Berklee College of Music, if you know, you know, an award-winning professor at Cal State Fullerton, and undergraduate degree at HU. Go Bison. Sorry, Hampton Pirates, but
You know.
HU, Howard is the real HU. So we're going to get into all that and then some with the one and only Mr. Amani Roberts. Mr. Roberts, thank you for coming on Beyond the
Cool,
Album Cover,
cool.
sir.
Yes, appreciate you having me. Thank you very much. HU, you know.
Yes, sir. I had to put that in there. And thing about HU is I did a college tour once to Howard when I was in high school. Since where I lived in North Carolina, DC is only a 4 hour drive. So we made that bus ride up to DC, Chocolate City, to see Howard University. And it's a very beautiful campus, rich in history, rich in blackness. And we're going to get more in depth to that later in the interview. But I just want to let you know that got some ties to the DMV relatives. And plus, for those that don't know, Chuck Brown, yes, the Godfather of Go-Go, was born and raised prior to moving to DC in my neck of the woods in North Carolina in Gaston, Northampton County before moving up to DC.
All right. All right. I love it. All right. Let's go.
Yes, sir. Let's jump right on in. So, where were you born and where did your love of music come from?
I grew up in the DC area, Silver Spring, Maryland. My love of the music, just listening to the radio as a kid. My dad really is the one who got me into music because he'd play his records Saturday morning, specifically wake my brother and I up before we watch cartoons with his records. He'd play them, and then I used to do a lot of traveling soccer. I was a very good soccer player, so we traveled all over the world. But when I was younger, it was mostly the East Coast. So on the road trips, it was all about the music in the car. So that's how my love grew. That's where it started.
And just like you, I was the same way, just loving music, sitting in front of the TV, watching whatever video show I could. And there was a little cable network that was based out in DC at the time. You may have heard of it, people called Black Entertainment Television, aka BET, founded by Robert Johnson in 1980. How integral was BET being based in DC for you and just spreading your appetite and love of music?
Well, I grew up listening to Donnie Simpson. If you remember Donnie Simpson, he was the host at first with Sherry Carter, then by himself of Video Soul. That's where I saw pretty much all the videos I saw growing up. And so BT and DC, you had Video Soul. They played videos, interviewed people, had specials. This was really when it was more of a music network than now it's more entertainment. So that's what's contributed to my love and learning about music.
And then you mentioned in the book 93.9 WKYS was an integral radio station to you and your love of music. Can you talk about the significance of KYS and what it means to DC and the surrounding areas?
So it was 93.9 WKYS. Of course, they just, they played all like what they call it now, they categorize like urban music, but like R&B. They started playing a little hip hop later in the game. And then it was that station. It was 96.3 WHUR, Howard University's radio station. They had the show, The Quiet Storm, and their lead-in song every episode was Quiet Storm by Smokey Robinson. That's where I got my love of slow jams for. And then also as the years went on, it was 95.5 WPGC. That's actually the station that broke the group Shy through their show DC Home Jams. And so those were the three stations. And then I even liked a little crossover like pop, R&B, soul. We had it was Glenn Hollis with Wash FM 97.1. Those were primarily my four stations when I was really, really young. It was also a station 100.3 called OK 100. And so those were the stations, the primary stations in radio that I listened to, taped songs from, and did all the things.
Yeah, and for those of you that are not young enough to remember, you used to be able to make pause tapes off the radio. You would have your Maxell, your TDK, 90 to 120-minute cassette tape. You would make sure to have it ready when the DJ played the song, pause it when the commercials, or if you were an ingenuine opportunity person, you would make a whole bunch of copies and sell them on the slide at school for a couple of dollars a pop.
There you go. That's what we used to do. It wasn't easy. Now you can just hit a button and listen to a song as many times as you want to. It wasn't that easy back in the day.
Mm-mm, no, not at all. You really had to go through high and low because if you missed the song, you had to wait and hope that the DJ would play it again. And that just shows how technology has changed to where how you mentioned now with streaming, you can easily just access songs and albums at a click. Whereas back when we were reared on the analog way of things, you had to wait for the DJ to play it or go high and low and hunt at your local or national record store chain in order to find that record or that single.
Yes, yes, indeed. That's the game.
Yes, sir. That was the game indeed. Now you mentioned WHUR and the Quiet Storm, and that was the station where the format originated. Can you go more in depth into that and talk about the significance of the late great Melvin Lindsay?
Ooh, Melvin Lindsay. Yes. He's the one that created that format with a friend of his. And then I'm forgetting the station manager's name. Ooh, I forget her name, but she's a legend in the industry. Her name's escaping me. She gave him approval to try it out. It went well. And then all stations across the country and in the world adopted a similar format in terms of they'd have the slow songs, dedications. That's what I love, the dedications you call in. Melvin Lindsay was actually the brother of my high school guidance counselor. So that's how I first learned of and listened to him. And what really captured me is that people would call in, make a request. He'd play the song that matches the request. It was primarily like R&B groups and R&B acts from like the 60s and 70s, and then the newer acts as we got into the 80s and 90s. And it kept going. It was a great radio format for a good 25 years. And then as needs and desires of the younger generation shifted, that radio format was kind of phased out. And now it's not, it's some popular, some nights, it's not every night like it used to be. And although I think WHR still has a Quiet Storm on their station, but worldwide it's a little different now. But that's kind of the origination of the show. Kathy Hughes was his manager there. Kathy Hughes was his manager, and that's when it was born.
And if you know broadcasting history, folks, you know the name Kathy Hughes.
Yes, yes, legend. She's a legend.
Yes, definitely a legend. Now, with you being in the DMV area, did you also listen to any stations coming out of Baltimore?
I would listen to V103. That was in Baltimore. And then 92.3. That was also in Baltimore because I had relatives. So if you're driving, and sometimes you can pick it up in DC, the V103, those two stations. Also, when I was really young, Frank Ski, who I believe is now based in Atlanta, he used to have a show on University of District Columbia Radio 90.1 where he would play hip hop records Saturdays from like 5 to 6 every week. And that's where I listened to his show to get my hip hop knowledge up because it wasn't really played as much as it is now. You had to wait for a certain time period, record the whole show, hope he played the songs you were looking for, or you had to wait till the next week. So those were the two Baltimore stations I played, and then that was another station in DC that I would listen to once a week.
Okay. Yeah, because when you think about Baltimore radio, I believe you had DJ Jeffrey C out of WEBB doing hip hop on the AM side, and then you mentioned V103. You know, you got New Marks with breaking some of those early hip hop records around Baltimore. And the thing about radio pre-Telecom 96 was that each region of the country had its own distinct flavor, distinct sound, where you knew, okay, on K97.5 in Raleigh Durham, these records were popping. On the box in Houston, these records were popping. On WJLB in Detroit, those records were hitting. On KMEL or KJLH, the records were hitting there. But when Telecom at 96 came, that was when radio became more homogenized. What's your take on that?
Yes.
And how do you think that kind of stifled the regional flavor within the radio industry?
Yeah, I talk about that in the book. That's a substantial reason as to the decline of R&B groups because you went from regions of the country, whether it be Atlanta, TLC popping off in Atlanta, Destiny's Child in Houston. You had, of course, Detroit with Motown, all the Motown acts, Philly with Boys to Men. All these groups pretty much got big regionally first and then grew to be international superstars. Once you had the Telecommunications Act of 96, three main companies, iHeartMedia, Town Square Media, and Cumulus Media, bought up all the radio stations around the country and went to a playlisting format. So you could be in Chicago, you could be in LA, Portland, Oregon, Dallas, Texas, Miami, Florida, and you're generally going to hear the same set of songs across all cities, which really hurt independent acts, specifically R&B groups, R&B acts, because it changed. That's a big reason, and the act was supposed to diversify radio, but ended up having the opposite effect.
hmm And I agree with that because I came into the broadcasting industry in 2008, 2009, and that was when, like we mentioned earlier, everything is homogenized where you have a corporate playlist where someone in said location can tell X amount of stations across the country what to play because they're going based off of what they think the listener would want, and it took the power out of the hands of the local MDs and PDs to get a lay of what songs, what artists work in a particular market.
Yeah. Yep. You said it. You said it.
And I kind of equate those days to the days of regional wrestling, where each promotion was popular in a region, but then, as we saw when Vince McMahon brought up all the regional territories to take WWE nationally, that's when everything became all one-stop shop. And like we mentioned with the Telecom Act of '96, that was when the flavor got stripped away to a all basic watered down recipe. Now, what led you to go to Howard for your undergraduate?
So for undergrad, I wanted to play soccer at a Division One school. So I had offers from Providence College, Virginia Commonwealth, University of South Florida, Virginia, VCU, University of South Florida, and there was one school in Ohio I'm forgetting. But my dad taught at Howard, and so they had a hospitality program. They had a Division One soccer team. My parents kind of decided for me, if I'm being honest, that I needed to be at Howard, so I went there, and that's kind of why I went. I'm glad I went, but that's kind of the circumstances that surrounded why I went. I was able to play soccer there, major in hospitality management and finance. So that's kind of how I ended up at Howard. Yeah, that's the story.
So what was it like being in Howard at the time and just knowing the rich history of Howard, all the alums, and then with a different world being on at this time and just the explosion of HBCU culture being put on the national stage? What was it like for you being in that environment at the time where you can experience Black excellence on the academic and
So
social side?
yeah, going to Howard was great. Both personally, just growing as a person, as a human being, education wise, definitely stretched me. Education, I learned a lot. Also, you just got to experience Freaknik in his heyday. You go down to Atlanta for Freaknik, Howard Homecoming, saw Biggie Smalls on the yard. We also had a time period at the end of when I was there when Usher was just starting out. So those were kind of legends passing in the night. Homecoming was a place. Spring Picnic was also really big in the spring. I was very fortunate to be able to go to Howard during those years, experience it, and still be able to share stories, tell memories, and watch many of my peers go on to bigger and better things, and just continue to celebrate HBCU love and tradition. Because sometimes nowadays it looks some HBCUs are under attack, so we need to keep the movement and the strength going.
Yeah, definitely that. And I've heard stories over the years from various people that attended Howard, that Howard's homecoming is one of those homecoming events that you'll mark on your calendar. Even if you're not an alum, you're going to make your way to DC.
Yes, absolutely. It's legendary, still is.
Now, tell me about going to Berkeley College of Music and what was the process like getting in and doing your master's in that program at that institution?
Yeah, Berkeley, you had to apply, you submit significant like essays, ideas for what your thesis would be. And I went during the pandemic, so it was mostly online for me. I went through the online program, and I've never done as much writing as I did through that year and a half. Never. And it allowed me to continue to add to my resume, give me credibility in the music business, because I had been a DJ already then for over 15 years, I want to say. So I had worked in the music industry, and then I just had an educational component. So I built on top of that. My thesis ended up being the book that you have in your hands there. That was the thesis there. and the network is phenomenal. So even now, I've been out for like 5 years almost now, and the network is still strong. You know, everywhere. A lot of musicians have some sort of degree of connection to Berklee College of Music. So it was intense. I'm thrilled that I went, and I just continue to try to give back and stay connected to the network.
And you mentioned DJing. Who are some of the DJs that influenced you to get behind the wheels of steel?
I grew up. I first saw DJ Biz Markie at this club in DC called Quigley's, and it was an amazing set. He set it off that night. Like he played all the music, all the hits, new, old. Even had a set of his set, a portion of his set where he played TV theme show songs. It was amazing, and that was then when I was like, ooh, I want to do what he does. But I didn't think it was a legitimate career. May he rest in peace. But I was wrong. So that's when I first kind of figured it out. I wanted to do that. And then of course, DJ Jazzy Jeff. He was big back in the day. Spinderella. She was also very big. One of the few female DJs that we knew. So those are probably the three that come to mind right off the bat: Jazzy Jeff, Bismarcky, and Spinderella.
And we mentioned at the top of the podcast Chuck Brown. And I want to talk about
Oh
real
yeah.
quickly the influence of go-go and how I feel go-go is still one of those last treasures of music that a region of the country can claim to be ours, where they tried in '88 when EU crossed nationally with the butt to take go-go on the national side, but it remains a DMV mainstay. I heard it a lot growing up as a kid in North Carolina since, like I mentioned earlier, DC is only a 4 hour ride. And of course, with NC, a lot of people either have family located in North Carolina or they come down to North Carolina for school or work. So we get a lot of that influence from the
Hmm.
DMV coming down. So talk about the influence of go-go.
Yeah, go-go music. That's the sound of DC. I love go-go music. I grew to love it after I left DC, ironically. Growing up, it wasn't really my thing, but after I left, I learned more about it. I was able to observe it from afar, would come back and learn more. And I always knew who Chuck Brown was and respected him because when I was playing jazz band in high school, we would play some of his songs, the instrumental version. So I knew about it, liked it, but I grew to love it after I left DC. And, Chuck Brown, Rare Essence, Junkyard, Pleasure, all these groups that are really, really big in the DC area, legends, and then I forget the name of the group. They did the remake of Pieces of Me. And I'll look that up. But that was one. That's another crossover that didn't really cross over, but it's still like a. If you hear that song out, people know that you know that song because you're from DC. For example, I was at a club in LA, and it was towards the end of the night, and I dropped that song, and this girl ran over to the DJ booth and said, "Are you from DC? Because only people from DC know this song. You're playing that song." I said, "Absolutely, I am." So it's just something unique about our culture in DC and the music that wherever you are in the world, if you drop certain songs, people are like, "Oh, you must be from DC because this is something you would hear." Even Pleasure's Christmas song. This past Christmas, I was DJing at a lounge in Vegas, a lounge in Las Vegas, and played that song. And this guy came up to me and said, "Where are you from originally, sir?" I said, "I'm from DC." He said, "I knew it because you played the Pleasure version of Santa Claus is Coming to Town," which I love. So that's just my story behind Go-Go. I continue to play it as often as possible and try to give it love as much as I can. Little Bitty and the
Yeah,
Masters, all these songs.
Yeah, because I can remember being in college in Greensboro when I would go to a nightclub and they would play the go-go version of Pieces of Me, and the hardest guy in the club was singing his heart out during the chorus. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do you know this go-go-fied version of Ashley Simpson? But to
Ashley
back to the
Simpson, yes. Rare
yeah,
Essence. Rare
yeah,
Essence,
Rare
Pieces of Me,
Essence.
yes.
Yeah, Rare
Whew, hot.
Essence.
That song is better than the original. Whew.
Yes, I agree. And with the regionality, style, and sounds of certain genres, you can really make a good living just touring the region alone and not have to go national. Because if you look at Southern Soul had its moment with boots on the ground, but it's primarily a regional thing where you can go to the Carolinas, Virginia, Georgia, Deep South, make your money there, and then repeat the cycle all over again. So it's good to still have those regional sounds still being kept alive and in the pocket, although everything now is more pushed on a world scale because the internet has made the world a lot smaller than what
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
doing analog because we necessarily didn't know what was going on in other parts of the country because we would get stuff from other parts of the country later than everywhere else.
Yep, agreed. You nailed it on the head.
Now, with this book, what I found fascinating and amazing is that when you look at the early pioneering groups of the 50s, that although they never really had the major recognitions of the latter groups from via the industry like the Grammys, AMAs, and what have you, their contributions cannot be denied and understated. What was some facts that you found interesting when putting together the book about certain groups?
Ooh, I think I'm trying to think of like some of the interesting facts. Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers. They were so interesting learning about them because I didn't know much about them at all, and just how they really were one of the first. I would say like crossover. They crossed over to like a popular audience. It was even so bad that a radio show host got in trouble and initially fired for having them in the same they were dancing with white girls or whatever, and that was just unallowed, not allowed back in the 50s. And so this radio host ended up, or the not TV, this TV host actually ended up getting fired because of what happened at the show. I think that they were ahead of their time because they succumbed to, like, Frankie Lyman was became addicted to drugs, and so that kind of was their downfall. But the way that they sang and the way they crossed over in the 50s, I think was they were ahead of their time. That was one that really stood out to me. Another group was just I knew about the Ozzy Brothers, but I through the research first I found out and discovered that they are the only group in history to have hits in 6 straight decades. So you think about all the groups in history, from the Beatles, Boys to Men, like Temptations, Supremes. They are the only group in history to have hits, new songs, in the Billboard Hot 100 for 6 straight decades. From the 50s, their first song was Shout, and then the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And I think that that's not talked about enough, so I love to share that fact. So the Ozzy Brothers will be a second one. I love In Vogue. When I was doing my research, I was shocked to find out they never had a Billboard Hot 100 number one hit. They would always come in second to like a TLC, Boys to Men, Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey. They were just they were at the right time, but they never got to a number one song. That's another group. What else comes to mind? Like, those were interesting. Trying to think what else. Just some of the history that was set. There's only two female groups in history that have diamond album sales. Female groups that are based in the U.S. Diamond sales in history. One's the Dixie Chicks, but TLC is on there. I think I always tell people if I was going to write another book, I'd write one about the highs and lows of TLC. I think it's a masterclass in what can go right and what can go wrong in the music business. So they always come to mind. And then also, it's funny because as a child growing up in the 80s, R&B groups, in terms of their success and award recognition, kind of hit a little bit of a lull. That shocked me too, because R&B groups were going strong in the 60s. You had the Supremes, the Temptations. In the 70s, you had Jackson 5, you had the Commodores, you had a whole bunch of groups in the 70s. In the 80s, it kind of hit a lull, which is shocking, but then the 90s were one of the strongest decades in history.
Yeah, I agree because as a kid of the 90s, just seeing how, from my vantage point, felt like 92, 93 was really that period where the Hot 100, it really was reflecting what was going on in R&B because you mentioned TLC earlier, you mentioned Boys to Men, you have Shy, Jodeci, Silk, H-Town,
Yeah.
BBD was still going
In
strong,
Vogue.
In Vogue, Color Me Bad. It was where everybody outside of the R&B realm was saying, hey, did some good stuff because a lot of these records were getting played on top 40 radio. Because I mean,
Yes.
if you
Yes.
look at there's a footage of the Mickey Mouse Club back in 93 where a baby Justin and JC from NSYNC was doing Cry For You Jodeci with other cast members of the
Yes.
Mickey Mouse Club, also with a pre-famous Ryan Gosling.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, if there's one week, I need to write down a specific week so I can refer to it more consistently. There's a week in like 96 or 97 where 14 out of the top 20 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 charts were R&B groups. That's in 1997. If you fast forward just a decade later, it was flipped, where 12 out of the top 20 songs were hip hop acts. So that shows you just how fast the shift was happening. But I mean, you mentioned SWV, like all these groups that were just like hot, Destiny Child was starting to come up in the late 90s. And then you mentioned In Vogue. You mentioned B Belle Biv DeVoe. New Edition was still cracking in the early 90s. You had H Town Shy, like all these groups that were really, really big. And yeah, it was just the golden era, in my opinion. And we're not even talking about the singular artists. We can get into the singular artists, but that's just groups.
It was just hot all across the board for R&B. So we're gonna stay on New Edition for a minute. And to me, it felt like after the miniseries that they are finally getting their long overdue flowers for their contributions, not only for R&B, but for pop culture. And they're one of the nominees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for 2026, and they led the fan vote for that, and it just wrapped up a successful first leg of the New Edition Way tour with Boyz II Men and Tony Braxton. So, can we just talk about the contributions of New Edition for pop culture and just what they mean overall as a group and as individual acts?
It's ironic to me that New Edition is on the doorstep of getting inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, yet they have never won a Grammy. And I don't think that any only Bobby Brown, or no, they got one nomination for If It Is Love, and I think B. Brown has got nominated for Every Little Step You Take. No, he won for Every Little Step, but the group never has had a Grammy. That's I think that's ironic. Then, if you look at current culture, and we all see the witness, the craze, and how successful K-pop is. BTS. You look at what BTS has done and is doing, they are copying the New Edition blueprint from their videos, from how they release albums, from their dances. Everything is like New Edition just with them, and they're being successful. So I challenge us, and when I say us, I always say us in terms of R&B fans and lovers and artists and executives. What is K-pop doing that we can in turn copy or emulate so that we can bring R&B groups back to the surface to be more successful? Because the group concept, it works in only the K-pop genre. Other genres like rock, pop, R&B, it's struggling. Country does okay at times, but K-pop, it's doing extremely well. The male and the female groups, so groups still work. What are they doing that we can adopt since they have adopted what we did back in the past? So I think New Edition is like they're one of my favorite groups in history. I think when you look at them, they started in the early 80s and now they're still selling out arenas. Arenas is serious. Like they can go to T-Mobile Arena in Vegas. They can go to the Forum in LA and sell it out multiple nights. That's pretty rare for what they're considered now as a legacy act. And I just think that shows the power of a New Edition. That shows how strong their fan base is, and they're still attracting new fans. So they more than deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I just think that they continue to rewrite the playbook because now they have, they have like 6 members because Bobby Brown will be there, Johnny Gill, Ralph Tresvant, well, Belle Biv DeVoe, all of them are together. Also, they brought us Belle Biv DeVoe, which actually had more commercial success in terms of individual songs than the group. So I just think that they are the preeminent, like they are legends. And you can still see their impact in groups that are popular today, particularly in K-pop.
Yeah, because we mentioned K-pop and how they pretty much studied the New Edition formula, also the formula of what Berry Gordy did with Motown and what the boy bands were doing in the late 90s, early 2000s, Backstreet
Yes.
Boys, NSYNC on steroids. And with New Edition, when you think about when they first came out in 83 with Candy Girl, it was foreign to a lot of radio listeners to hear a rap in an R&B record. But you got to think about it with them, they were the first generation of kids to grow up with rap. So it was only right to mix
Right.
that in, and their name alone that was given to them by Brooke Payne was that they are a new addition to the groups of yesteryear, like the Temptations, the Whispers, the
Hmm.
OJs, the Shy Lights, Blue Magic, and they just added a little hip hop flavor to it.
Yeah, yeah. I think so New Edition, also K-pop groups follow and copy the format of TLC. Blackpink looks like TLC did coming up. So I think that. Also, you mentioned the Whispers. I think the Whispers are probably one of the best examples for R&B groups, so the R&B genre in general, and I want to say in history because they released their first single in 1964. Their goal was, amongst other things of being successful, they wanted to get a Billboard Hot 100 top 10 hit. It took them 23 years to get into the Billboard Top 10 in 1987 because they have the hit Rock Steady. I think that reached number 7 on the charts. I don't know how many other groups would have stuck with it for 23 years through the 60s, 70s, and 80s when it was hard for groups to perfect their craft and stick with it. So whenever I talk on main stage about the subject of resilience, and this is resilience for corporate leaders, business people, children, everything, I always use the whispers as an example because I'll say to people, what were you doing 23 years ago? Because they stuck in it for 23 years and got their hit and continue to experience success.
And I believe the Solar Run doesn't get talked about enough, like we do Motown
Mm-mm.
and other story labels, what Dick Griffey did and Leon Silver's third, and how what they did really helped shape the music industry. It was also where you mentioned Rocksteady, one of the early top 10 pop hits for LA and Babyface. The Whispers was on Solar.
Mm-hmm.
Babyface was on Solar. I believe Dynasty, Solar, Wiki Shalimar, and Solar
Mm-hmm.
started originally, for those that don't know, as Soul Train Records, partnership between Dick
Yeah.
Griffey and Don Cornelius. They put out the Soul Train
Yes.
game, but when Don Cornelius wanted to focus more on the show, that was when Dick Griffey was solely at the helm, and it got rebranded as Solar. And if you look at the logo on the Solar, it was a little nod to Soul Train because I believe the S and the O were connected. So that's a little Easter egg for those of you
Yeah.
that don't know.
Yeah. That great, great Easter egg. I'm trying to think. Also, you had the run before Solar with like Gamble and Huff, those phenomenal, famous producers. They produced a significant amount of R&B group hits, R&B hits in general. And then there was, I'm trying to look here, the famous record label out of Memphis, and I'm forgetting its name. Oh, a
Stacks.
record label from Memphis. Yes, Stax. Stax. They also had a good run. They were at early, early on. Stax Records. They were early, early on. So you had like Stax Records, which led into like Motown, which then led into like Solar, and then you get into the 80s and 90s. LaFace was really big, and you can just follow the trends.
You mentioned Gamble and Huff, Philly International. Sigma Studios was very important to the Philly sound. You had Gamble and Huff. You had Thom Bell, Linda Creed, Bunny Siegler,
Yes.
and how that sound really established era. You had the OJs, the Jacksons after they left Motown, ended up working with Gamble and Huff to get that refined, mature sound. Billy Paul, and it had that lush, smooth sound, but also kept the raw essence of funk, and it also gave us the Soul Train theme by MFSB, Mother, Father, Sister, Brother.
Yeah. Yeah. Lots of history there. There's only so much I could cover in the book, but lots of history.
Yeah, and real quick, I want to pivot. I want to talk about just the impact and the influence of Uptown Records and what it did for pop culture. And rest in peace, Andre Harrell, how he was able to find that sweet spot of the raw essence of blackness, but with that pop sheen, which later Diddy ended up adopting and turning it into Bad Boy.
Yeah, so like when you look at Uptown, Jodeci, like they came off the jump with Forever My Lady, that hit after hit after hit. You and I, that's my favorite Jodeci song. But Fiendin', Cry for You, like all these songs that were just like legendary. You also had Guy. Guy was part of Uptown, so like I Like, Piece of My Love, Goodbye Love, like all these songs like Guy, and then just continued the run. Of course, you had, I think Mary J. Blige was there, Heavy D and the Boys, of course. Then Soul for You, which had Candy Rain and Every Little Thing I Do. And so Uptown had its time period. I wish it could have been longer, but they definitely laid the groundwork for Diddy to copy and continue with that kind of style and essence of a record label.
Mhm. And you mentioned Teddy Riley, and he just put out a memoir, Remember the Times. And I want to get your opinion on what was it like the first time you heard Make It Last Forever by Keith Sweat, and you knew that R&B was going to change, where it was mixing rap beats with R&B melodies.
Yeah, like the New Jack Swing era. That was a slow jam because Keith Sweat was in the New Jack Swing era and Teddy Riley. But that song, that's a classic, legendary R&B duet. Jackie McGee also sings on that, and I just think that that song hit at the perfect time in the perfect year, and it just really, really kind of blew. That was kind of Keith Sweat's first big hit, and it's still played to this day. Like I saw Keith Sweat and Joe in concert a month ago, and that song, in addition to "I'll Give All My Love to You," those were the two songs that got the biggest reaction, and it just Mariah Carey, Joe, and 98 Degrees and Nas did a remix sampling that beat, so it continues to live on. And I just think that that was just an introduction to, first you have someone singing, then you had like a female duet with like a hip hop feel to it. That was new, it was fresh, and it was everlasting.
Yeah, it was street and sweet, and you kind of heard elements of hip hop coming in with R&B because I always say Full Force kind of laid the groundwork before what Teddy came out with Keith with Make It Last Forever, and prior to that, his work with Dougie Fresh and Kumo D. But Full Force was kind of putting elements of that in their stuff, and then of course with Lisa and Nicole Jam, where she was really one of the pioneers of freestyle and how she, along with Gloria Stefan, opened up the door for other female Latina acts to really explode and really do their thing in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, can we just talk about real quickly just the impact of Full Force?
Full force. With my Lisa, All Cried Out, Lisa and the Cult Jam, and I Wonder If I Take You Home, like those two songs right there, whew, just like hits. Full Force produced them. They actually sang on it. Like they had their time period too. And those two songs, like the timeless one, the fast song, like I Wonder If I Take You Home, Will You Still Love Me Tomorrow, like that song right there can still get played to this day and get head nods and work a room, especially in an opening set. Then All Cried Out, it was remade by Allure. It's like it's a great love song. It's a classic love song. And so Full Force, as they say in, down south, they stuck their foot in those two. So for sure, just classic songs. And Lisa still tours, big freestyle artist. So she crossed over with freestyle and R&B and just really kind of gave it that flavor. So you just start to see early on examples of how R&B can touch different genres and have just as big an impact. And she was a first example because she was big in freestyle as well as R&B.
Right. And for those that don't know, Full Force, they also had a hand in the 90s, early 2000s pop scene, writing, producing All I Have to Give for Backstreet Boys, working on Britney Spears, NSYNC, and also early Rihanna when Rihanna first came out. So
Mm-hmm.
Full Force has had their hands in the industry for a long time. And also want to say in the book, I'm glad you mentioned this group I'm about to talk about right here. They're my second favorite group after New Edition, hailing from Pasadena, California. Can we talk about Troop?
Ooh, all I do is think of you, Sweet November, Spread My Wings. Like I had their CD, Troop CD. Though those were all on that. Well, no, that was the Spread My Wings, and um, I think all I do and think of you was on that one. But Troop was, they were another great boy group. I kind of feel like they didn't they kind of ended early. They couldn't last as long as some other ones, but they had a nice run of like half a decade. And they remade the Michael Jackson All I Do Is Think of You. Spread My Wings is good. What was the other Troop song I used to love? There was another group that was similar to Troop, Whistle. They had the Still My Girl. But let me see here. Troop's top songs. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I Will Always Love You.
Mhm.
Yes. All I Do Is Think of You, Spread My Wings, Always Love You, Sweet November, and Still in Love, and then Mamacita. Those are like their big hits there. In like the late 80s, early 90s, they were top group. I still have their CD.
Yeah. I just remember being a kid, hearing them on the radio, seeing them on Video Soul, dancing Chris, singing Chris. And if you look at the album credits on the Attitude album, some of the cuts that was produced on that album was done by young Dallas Austin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good one there. Like, you could just follow the breadcrumbs. You see how the acts start and how they finish.
And who was put into the game by George Spinderella Irby from Climax, and I feel Climax don't get talked about enough for what they did as well, and how all female band being self-contained, writing, producing, and then of course had the crossover top 40 hit in I Miss You. And let's just talk about Climax briefly for a moment.
Yeah, I Miss You. They also had there's a meeting in the ladies' room. They had the men all pause. Oh, they had another slow jam that was good. But also Joyce Cinderella Irby, she also discovered Lloyd. So famous singer Lloyd, she discovered him too in an elementary school or middle school, one of those two. She discovered him too. So Climax, I just love them because it was rare in those days to see an all-female group, particularly when you had the drummer, the bass player. It seems so simple now, but that was not very common back in the day, and it wasn't shown, and they were out there. I'd still say yes. That's their other slow jam there. Yeah, I Miss You, the Men All Pause, Meeting in the Ladies Room, and I still say yes. Like those are like their four big ones that I love.
Yeah, definitely got to give it up for Climax, and also get catch my throwback interview on Beyond the Album Cover with Bernadette Cooper from Climax, available wherever you hear podcasts. And I believe Jam and Lewis also worked with Climax early on, and that let's talk about them and just how they were able to transition from the time to be one of the most prolific songwriting, producing partners in music history.
Yeah, I mean, what can we not say about them? They're legends again. I just think about how they just grew and blew up with Janet Jackson. That's but they had also big hits from Mariah Carey, Mary J. Blige. Like they covered all the legendary artists. They helped them kind of grow, and they discovered new artists. They put new artists on. I don't know if they have an autobiography or a biopic, but I would love to read that or work with them if they don't. But yeah, they're still making hits with Babyface now, Mariah's again. Like they're still making hits with even current artists and legendary artists. So there's not much you can't say about them. They're legends too.
No, and another songwriting producing team that are legends, LA and Babyface. And when you think about LA and
hmm
Face, they got their starts in the deal. And with the deal, when you
hmm
look at their look and their sound, that pretty much showed you that what Prince in the time was doing was white hot, because the deal, Ready for the World, Dream Boy, all of those
hmm
acts were pretty much following the lead of what was going on in Minneapolis. Even the Jets, although they weren't, you know, having the Prince look, but they had the sound thanks to, I believe, was Bobby Z or somebody within the Prince camp was working with the Jets with Curiosity. They had hits such as Crushing It, but back to LA and Face. Just, I
Yeah.
mean, we mentioned earlier Rocksteady. They did Roses Are Red for the Mac Band, Knocked Out, Paula Abdul, but they really came into focus, into view when they did a Little Monster album for artists that got kicked out of a popular boy group called Don't Be Cruel by Bobby Brown. So, what was that take when you
Yeah.
first heard Don't Be Cruel for the first time, and just knowing that these guys are something special? And it gave Bobby that flavor that I personally felt was
Yeah.
lacking on King of Stage, because I felt that was MCA's way of still cashing in on Bubblegum New Edition Bobby and Don't Be Cruel, combined the elements of the street and the sweet.
Yeah. I'll never forget. I was watching. I think it was a video. Don't Be Cruel. I think was the first video. It was either Don't Be Cruel or Every Little Step You Take. And I was watching it with my parents, and the women were kind of like short skirts and clad outfits, and my parents were so hot and bothered because of that. Nowadays, you wish you died for to have them dressed that way. Now they don't wear anything. So I remember that. I also remember Roni. So that was Bobby Brown's probably first. I think it was on his second album because he did. I think maybe his first album, Roni, and that was Babyface's song. He wrote it because he had experience. It's a great story. He tells a story. I think he tells a story on either R&B Money or he tells it on Questlove's podcast. And he talks about how he created the word Roni, which is from Tenderoni, how that word came to be. Classic, classic slow jam. That's probably, in my opinion, Bobby Brown's best slow jam and one of his top three songs in history. And then, where Babyface, LA Reid and Babyface really, really took off into the stratosphere. Because remember the deal they had Shoot 'em Up, Gotcha, Bang Bang, and then they had Two Occasions. I only think of you on Two Occasions, Day and Night. Classic song, especially the live version. And then they were just creating hits, but they really like he really not got crossover, widespread, mass appeal when he did End of the Road with Boyz II Men in like 90. Let me think here. 95, I think. 95, 94. It was on the Boomerang soundtrack. Um, and it just like that cemented him, and then that was 95, so we're talking 30 years later. Still, I see him many times when he comes to tour in Vegas, still producing hits. He had a couple hits on SZA's album. Like, he's still producing many things, and he was just everyone was going to Face and LA Reid and Babyface in like the 80s and 90s to get their songs. Eric Clapton, Mary J. Blige, Mariah Carey, Christopher Williams. Like, everyone went there across all genres to get their hits by him. And nowadays, he still produces. He's more in the background. But they created their own label, LaFace Records. Took it to Atlanta. That's where their headquarters were. Of course, they had Pebbles. That was part of that also. It just their tentacles go deep, wide, and deep. So legends. Again, we're just bringing up legends after legends.
And you mentioned LaFace and how they had the foresight to go to Atlanta and then put all this untapped
Yes.
talent out. TLC, Usher, Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, Outkast, and just how
Yes.
they had the foresight to know, okay, there's something going on down here. We got to cultivate this talent, give them an outlet, just kind of like how when Teddy Riley set up shop in Virginia Beach with Future Studios, and how Chad, Pharrell, Mikey, the Neptunes got exposure through those talent shows that was held at Virginia Beach, and also everything that came out of the Tidewater area of Virginia with Missy, Timbaland, and it was just a great time for music in the 90s with established and new acts coming in.
Yeah. The 757, as they call it, down in Newport News, Hampton area, Virginia Beach. So yeah, like it just area once again that tells you areas of the country where a lot of these acts and sounds were born. And so it's a little different now because it's just less opportunity for groups and individual acts to get public recognition and plays. It's all like internet based, so it just takes away a lot of the local flavor getting to become popular nationwide.
Yeah, because the only way you really had to get in back in the day was either A or B, drive to LA or New York, hope that you could walk into the lobby unannounced at a record label, sing for your supper, because I believe that's what Jodeci ended up doing, where they drove from North Carolina to New York to go to Uptown, sing for Andre Harrell, and it
Yeah.
was Heavy D, rest in peace, who kind of put a bug in Andre Harrell's ear, where it was like, yo, you need to sign these guys. And the thing about them was, there were four country boys from my neck of the woods, NC. They were in suits in the Father MC Treat Them Like They Want to Be Treated video. And then by the time they came out, thanks to Diddy's marketing genius, where you got the combat boots and the backwards cap and just had that bad boy appeal, but the sweet melodies of R&B, and also at the same time as well, while they were being primed and being ready to come out, young Mary J. Blige was cutting her teeth as well. Because if you listen to the I'll Do For You record by Father MC, she was singing backgrounds. And then there's a video of Jeff Redd doing I Found Lovin', classic record by the Fatback Band, on Apollo with a young Mary J. singing backgrounds.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it all, it all adds up. So absolutely.
Now, one group of the 90s that I think doesn't get talked about enough, they should have been bigger than what they were, was Intro.
Mm. Intro, like their first album, that Ribbon in the Sky. Whew, they did that remake justice, and Come Inside. Whew, I mean, that song is hot. And so they had a couple hits. Their follow up albums were relatively successful, but their initial debut album was stacked with, I think it was 3 or 4 hits. They had a couple fast songs that were good too, and the sound was crisp and strong. It's just the follow ups weren't as strong for that group, but woo, they came in hot. That was like summer '94, '95. I remember those songs in DC when I was working at Marriott, but driving on the radio, they were played all the time. Intro's a good one there.
Yeah, Intro's a good one. And I had a chance to interview Buddy from Intro, and he told me originally Let Me Be the One was supposed to have gone to Mary J. Blige and be on 411. But what happened was that they already turned the album in to MCA for deadline, and they just ended up cutting it on them for the debut.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That happens. That happens. But that's another strong group right there. Just a great
Yeah,
one.
yeah, and can you talk about real quickly the transition of in the 80s? You had a lot of these big bands from the 70s that were transitioning to the 80s, and a lot of those styles kind of was phasing out. And a few of those groups were able to make that transition. Others weren't. To me, one of the groups that was able to make that transition so well was Sky. Because I remember as a kid hearing Start of a Romance on the radio, and then Real
Start
Love
of romance. Yeah.
was worn out heavy on K97.5 on the Quiet Storm with Thomas the Thrill Hill. And it was just one of those standout records for me that I remember from my childhood always being played on the radio.
Yeah, like let me think here. Start of romance. Yeah, yeah. So Sky, they didn't have as the catalog to match of the other groups of their time, but they had the potential there. So that's one that just wanted more from them. You wanted more from them.
Mhm. Yeah, you wanted more from them, and it was just where it was focusing more singular, but like you mentioned earlier, groups are working in certain genres, but not others. There's a group called Solidified. They were formed on the Netflix show Building the Band, which is a mix of American Idol, The Voice, Making the Band, Love is Blind, where bands are formed, voice heard, sight unseen until you meet for the first time. And you should check them out because they're a mix of all the groups that I love, pop R&B wise of the 90s, 2000s, and it's with a new school twist. So I definitely think they're one of those groups that, with the right sound, with the right time and material, that they can really be something special. Now, I want to transition talk about Drew Hill from Baltimore, Maryland, and how when they came onto the scene, they just came out like gangbusters. And then Cisco putting out his solo material just reached superstar status once the Thong song crossed over.
So Drew Hill from Baltimore, right? That's what you want to talk about.
Yeah, Drew Hill.
And what is the name? I gotta remember. I have so many facts inside my head that they used to sing at that like ice cream shop in Inner Harbor in Baltimore. I'll look it up, but yeah, that's how they first got big and were kind of discovered, and then they were big, and they once again that's another one. They worked with Babyface in like the late '90s, early 2000s, had 3 or 4 strong albums. Then Cisco went solo, but now they still tour together, so they're still making music, still performing, adding to their legacy. So that's Drew Hill, great group, like, and they could sing and harmonize. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on Drew Hill. So let's see, what ice cream shop did Drew Hill work at? And then they were there. What was it? The Fudgery. They worked at the
The
Fudgery
Fudgy.
in Baltimore, not ice cream shop, the Fudgery place. And so that's where they worked. And you know, they first sang there and got big there, got their deal, got their album, and continue to make songs. Someone Sleeping in My Bed, the remix, is a classic hip hop R&B duo. Yeah, that's Drew Hill for you. Baltimore, Baltimore's own. Much respect.
Yeah, now with them being from Baltimore and with DC, now are there two separate cultures to DC and Baltimore? Because I know some people don't like to conflate the two and kind of say, hey, we're DC, hey, we're Baltimore. Can you give us a take on that since you grew up near both of those areas? Are there different cultures between the two
Yes.
cities?
Yes, definitely two different cultures, two different cities. Baltimore, in my opinion, is not part of the DMV. They're part of Baltimore. That's my opinion. And are definitely two distinct different cultures, even though they're only about 35 miles away from each other.
Yeah, they're definitely distinct, definitely their own. And with DC, we got to mention DC's own Johnny Gill, how when he came into New Edition in 1987 with the transition of Bobby going out and them knowing that Ralph was going to go solo, they felt we needed a strong singer to really keep the ship afloat. And that was when Mike brought the idea of Johnny. And it felt like on the Heartbreak album that Jam and Lewis really took the untapped potential of all the members, brought in Johnny, and really showcased his talent vocally and helped bring New Edition to a more mature sound while also at the same time letting them grow with their audience who grew up with them 5 years earlier in Candy Girl. So what was it like when you first heard Heartbreak and just knowing from the previous album that New Edition is back with a new sound and new attitude, and especially with Johnny Gill from DC coming into the fold?
I think when you hear the song "Can You Stand the Rain," that's when you hear Johnny, and you're like, "Woo!" Um, you knew something was different. So "Can You Stand the Rain"? That's legendary, classic song. He sings lead on that song, and that's when you knew. And then they had a couple other songs in there that he would be singing lead because most of the time Ralph Tresvant was the lead singer, and so he sang lead a couple times, and you just knew that it was different. And then had Any Heartbreak remix. That was an album where I would walk to school and just listen to it constantly, back and forth in my Walkman, and yeah, there was Walkman back in the day. So that was every song. I know the words to that one.
Mhm. And I thought it was masterful how Jam and Lewis worked Johnny into the record, where you necessarily didn't hear him much on the first half of the album, but once you got to that back half, when Any Heartbreak, You're Not My Kind of Girl, then of course Can't Stand the Rain, you really start to hear more of Johnny and just them making a statement of, okay, this is the direction that we're going. This is the sound. And we're taking people on a journey to where we're saying, hey, we're not those same little kids singing Candy Girl in 83 or Have Crazy in 1985. We're boys to men now, which leads into my next thing I want to talk about. The four cats out of Philadelphia discovered backstage at Powerfest in Philly by Mr. Michael Bivins, Boys to Men, and just their impact and what they meant for pop culture and the music industry, period.
Yeah, Boyz II Men from Philly, the only R&B group in history to have diamond status for album sales so far. Not the Temptations, not any of the other groups. They're the only R&B group in history to have diamond sales for one of their albums ever. That's it. They went from performing small crowds to crowds as large as 300,000. I think it was like a Philly Summerfest they were performing at. Then they actually struggled and they ended up performing in smaller crowds of like 3,000. I remember one time they had a show of like 2,000 people in Charleston, South Carolina. But now they were one of the first groups in like the hip hop R&B space to say, you know what? We're going to do a Vegas residency to kind of get back our fans and grow. They were one of the first groups to do that. They did a Vegas residency, and now their shows they're selling out like smaller arenas and things like that. So they were at the highest of highs, then they were at the lowest of lows, but then they came back, did the residency in Vegas, and used that to propel them to now higher heights.
And like I mentioned earlier, they just wrapped the first leg of the New Edition Way tour with New Edition and Tony Braxton. Then on a couple of the stops, Mike came out on stage to perform with him, which was great because since leaving the
Yes.
group, it's rare to see all four on stage. So it was a treat when those clips came out on YouTube to see the original four back together and just what
Mm-hmm.
they did for R&B, for pop culture is still being felt and impacted to this day. And while we're on the subject of R&B groups, we mentioned New Edition, I want to give Maurice Starr his props and just what he meant, what he means to pop culture with, discovering New Edition because as the story goes, he put on a talent show in Boston, and New Edition came in second place to the Funk Effects, and how he gauged the audience reaction and said, "Hey, I can do something with these boys." So he took it upon himself to have them go in the studio, cut Candy Girl. And then when everything fell out with New Edition, he said, I'm going to do the same thing, but on the pop side, and put together this pop counterpart act that we all know and love called New Kids on the Block, and how this black man put together the world's biggest pop group and discovered the R&B group that would flip R&B and pop music on his head. So let's just talk about real quickly Maurice Starr and just what he means to the industry and to pop culture in general with his hands with New Edition and of course with New Kids on the Block.
Yeah, I mean, you said it all there. Like he discovered New Edition, got them to a certain level, and then went back and also got New Kids on the Block. Please Don't Go Girl, one of my favorite songs by them, and helped them launch them into worldwide sensations. That's what he did. He went two for two that time, and so he's also someone that helped bring some of our favorite groups to the forefront.
For those that don't know, New Kids on the Block was originally marketed as an R&B act. They were signed to the R&B division at Columbia Records with Larkin Arnold, Cecil Holmes. The first album didn't do so well, and he convinced Columbia to do a second album, which came out to be Hanging Tough. But Please Don't Go Girl, they originally shot a low budget version that you probably saw on BT back in the day when they were in the auditorium and it looked very homemade, but that was before the pop phenomenon came into play. And the one
Hmm.
thing that I always appreciated about them, and also had a chance to interview Danny Wood, is that they always made it known New Edition paved the way for us. Boy bands did not start with us. New Edition did it first. And you always give respect where respect is due. And I kind of feel that's what's missing with the industry, where you're not really seeing homage being paid to those that came before you, where, okay, if it wasn't for TLC, there'll be no girl group here. If it wasn't for New Edition, there wouldn't be no boy group here. And it kind of feels like with everything being instant now, and it's where the age of that you don't know, that you're not going to be able to respect the tradition of what came before you.
Um, so I think nowadays groups and singular artists, the way they pay homage is by sampling. So they might sample some of their favorite artists and some of their favorite songs and give the artists some of the publishing and songwriting credits. They can continue to earn money. And also they get more public plays showing people where the sample comes from. So I think although it's not as direct and it's not put in the media, I do think some of the newer artists today, that's how they pay homage is through sampling. But, in terms of coming out and saying that, we are here because of New Edition or TLC or all the famous or the Temptations or the Supremes or SWV. Like they don't do that, but they do show that through sampling, is what I think.
Mm. And you're at Cal State Fulton. I want to get your take on how do the young demographic nowadays, how do you feel they consume R&B?
They'll hear it in a TV show, in a movie, and they'll research it. They might hear a song that they think is an original. They'll find out that it's a remake or interpolation. They'll go research the original. They'll share it. A lot of them get into R&B. They learn it a lot. I think it seems so simple, but through their parents. Most of my students, who are probably between like 21 to 30, learn about R&B music through their parents, growing up listening to the songs when their parents would drive them to the bus stop or to school, and they would sing along. So most of the current younger people learn a lot of music through their parents, through video games, through movies, soundtracks, TV shows, and those are the most common ways that they learn about R&B music. Absolutely.
So it's more secondary where parents, and then it gets passed on, which for me, it was surprising when Building the Band came out that all these kids wanted to form groups, and how I kind of feel now with social media is very much catered towards the individual. So to see groups
Agreed.
being formed for me was very shocking.
Yeah. Yeah, social media has made that, I talk about that in the book a little bit, like made everything more individual in terms of consumption, in terms of putting out content, in terms of being your own individual, personal brand. So for groups, I'm excited that they want to perform groups, but I'll be more excited when they stay together for more than one album cycle. And so that's kind of the key is you want them to stay together for 3, 4, 5 album cycles because that's what the legendary R&B groups did. They stayed together for decades, 4, 5, 6, 7 albums together, and then went solo. That doesn't happen anymore.
No, it almost feels where there's no time to really breathe as an artist because everything is so quick that you got to constantly be in front of somebody's face. unless you are Kendrick Lamar, Beyonce, or someone with some type of cachet or name already built. You can have fans wait for you, but when you just starting out, you can't do that. You got to go, 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 and constantly pump out.
Yeah, yeah. Like nowadays, if you're silent for 2, 3 months, people forget about you. They stop following you. They just forget about you. Whereas, we might have back in the day waited a year or two or three for a new TLC album, a new SWV album, even a new. I mean, look how long Michael Jackson went between albums. Like, and we would wait because we loved it. Nowadays, patience is very slow, very short, excuse me, and people. It's just you have to stay top of mind whether or not you're putting out a new album, a new single, a new video, going on tour, starring in a movie, starring in a TV show. You have to stay top of mind, or people will forget you because our attention spans are so short, and that's
Mhm.
unfortunate.
Yeah, that's very, very unfortunate. And I kind of think that's probably why it's tough to have the superstars, the legends like we had back then, because the machine that was promoting was different too. Where you had labels, you had radio that was promoting, there was a middleman that pretty much kind of filtered out through everything. Whereas now it's direct to consumer, where the filter's gone, where you're the filter, you're the A&R, you decide what's hot or what's not. So it's pretty much like we're the consumers are the box. If you know, you know the music that you control. And no, I did not try to dial that 800 number and get charged $3.99 to order a video. My mama would have my hide. But last question, I want to get you out on this, and you talk about current projects. Just your take on the evolution of Michael Jackson and how he started as a child star in the Jackson 5, transitioned to an adult superstar, and within 2 weeks, we're going to have the release of Michael with his nephew, Jafar Jackson, playing the King of Pop himself, and how I feel is going to be one of the most scrutinized biopics of all time, because knowing how beloved and universally loved Michael Jackson was, and how at one point in time when Thriller was out, one out of three homes on Thriller, and we'll never have a star of that magnitude again, in my opinion. So, just your take on Michael Jackson's transition and your thoughts on the upcoming Michael biopic.
I think, if you're thinking about musicians and you have like a Mount Rushmore, like Michael Jackson's on the Mount Rushmore, like he's a legend. Um, you know, it's so funny because I was speaking to these students in West Virginia. So West Virginia, predominantly Appalachia, so white bluegrass country. And I put up a picture and I was talking to them about their favorite artists. And sure enough, two people in the class of 12 or 13 were like Michael Jackson. So he crosses age demographic, racial demographics, geography. Like everyone knows Michael Jackson has a favorite song. You can put his song on at any time in a DJ set and people will come to the floor and dance. It just you can't put into words what he means to the world in terms of music, just life in general, everything. He's a legend. And so with this new biopic that's coming out, there'll always be haters. There'll be people who are upset. You can't please everyone, but I'm excited to see how they portray him. What's was never earned a Grammy. It's another thing I learned through the research. And then for Off the Wall, he didn't get a Grammy for that too, which is why he was really upset with the Academy. But finally for Thriller, he won numerous Grammys. So that's kind of my thoughts there. I'm just excited to learn more about him and to, hopefully they have some good inside information that's factual. And let's watch it and see and keep the conversation going. People will never ever forget Michael Jackson. He's going to live on forever, long after he's gone, like a Beethoven, like a Mozart. He's up in that stratosphere.
Yeah, he's definitely one of those. And don't argue with me. Off the Wall is his best album because I felt like it was Michael reintroducing himself as I'm not that little boy from the Jackson 5 anymore. I'm a grown man. I'm smooth. I'm confident. While Thriller says I'm a pop icon. And I'm focusing on middle America. I mean, this man single-handedly changed the way we saw music videos, changed them from being, oh, let's just go
Hmm.
shoot here and we're gonna make it a movie, we're gonna make it an event. Because I remember
Yeah.
watching Remember the Time in real time when BET, ABC, NBC, CBS, MTV simulcasted in real time. I believe Black or White had that same treatment as well. It was where it was a world premiere global event, and we won't see anybody with that magnitude ever again. Now, current projects that you're working on that you can speak on if you can.
So right now I'm really, really focused on working with musicians who are trying to earn more money. So if you're out there and you're listening, a musician, and maybe you haven't got enough airplay or you don't have all your royalties set up with your PRO, whether it be ASCAP, BMI, or CSAC, you're looking to get into more playlists, looking to get sync opportunities, your music into TV shows, movies, films, video games, etc., commercials. Like I'm just helping musicians. I work with musicians to help them make better business decisions and earn more money. So if that's the case and that's you, my website, amaniexperience.com/call. That is, I just want to talk to you. We have a free call, see about how maybe I can help you or I can point you in the direction of where you can get some help. But I see too many artists leaving money on the table and I want to help them. And that's what I do. That's what it's called, like a fractional artist manager. That's what I do. So that's kind of what I'm working on. My next side project is to turn the book you have into a trivia game. And that should hopefully be out by the 2 year anniversary of the book.
All right, and you know where to go when that game comes to existence. I'm all about a good game, and you can get the book, The Quiet Storm, wherever books are sold, also available in ebook form. So, any shout outs you want to give before we conclude this interview?
No, just thank you very much for having me. And I appreciate it. You can follow me on the socials at Amani Experience. And I appreciate the time and all the detailed questions.
Yes, sir. I appreciate you. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream podcasts and on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/beyond the album cover. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you and round of applause for Amani Roberts for coming on Beyond the Album Cover. Thank you for coming on, Amani, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.